Okay. Here we go. Thank you for that introduction. Today we are doing section 2.1. It's all about solving equations using adding and subtracting. So that's our goal today, is to solve one-step equations. We'll look at multi-step equations later on this week. So that is coming, but today we're just doing one-step equations, and we're only focusing on solving them using addition and subtraction. Does anyone need more time with this page? Okay. Okay, do you guys remember those flashcards from when you were little? They look something like this. You don't have to write this down, just look at it. So it's like 5 plus box or blank equals 9. And you would have to come up with what went in the box, right? What would go in that box? 4. That's solving equations. What you just did right there is algebra. That is what we're doing today, but instead of a box, we'll use variables. Any questions so far? All right, here's another example we can look at. Do any of you play Super Mario Brothers? Kind of a fun game. A little old school. Okay, so let's say Mario has 15 coins. Luigi has 5 coins and a chest. What if I tell you that they are currently tied with how many coins they have? What do you know about the chest? The chest must have 10 coins. You just did algebra again. We have 15 coins for Mario. Luigi has 5 coins plus a chest. So you could do it in pictures like we did at the beginning, and we thought, oh, there has to be 10 coins in the chest. Or you can look at it like an equation. You would have to add 5 and 10 to make 15, so the C would have to be 10. We already have the 5. All right, so here is just a couple different ways of thinking about equations. Do you guys have any questions? For the rest of the ones we do today, I'm not going to use like the flashcards, and I'm not going to draw you cute little coin pictures. We're just going to look at the equations, but I want you to think back to these 2 examples. You guys could do these super quickly, and for some reason when I add X's and Y's and P's and Q's, everyone sort of forgets what we're doing. Okay, so try to think back to these. We're just trying to find out the missing piece. What goes in the box? What goes in the coin or in the chest? How many coins? Same idea, except we're just thinking, well, what does the letter have to be? Questions? All right, we have some vocabulary terms to look at. The first one, and you do need to write these down, is isolate. Isolate means to get the variable by itself. So I'm sure you guys have heard of like putting someone in isolation. Like if they get really sick, they put them in isolation. That means they put them by themselves, right? Same thing in math. If we're isolating the variable, we're getting it by itself. And the next definition is inverse operations. Inverse operations are operations that undo each other. So, for example, today we're going to focus on addition and subtraction. Those are inverse operations. If you want to undo adding something, you subtract it. If you want to undo subtracting, you add it. They are inverse operations. All right, so if you're still writing, that's fine. You don't need to write down this next part, though. Anytime I say the word equation, you need to remember that there's going to be an equal sign. Okay, this equal sign is sort of like a balance, like a scale. Okay, whatever you have on one side, if you want to keep it balanced, you need the same thing on the other side. So that's what we're going to do today. So if I told you that 15 equals 15, can you agree with that statement? 15 and 15 are the same thing. Everyone agree? So let's say that I want to add 7 to the left side. What do I have on the left now? 22. Are the sides balanced right now? No. How could I make them balanced again? Add 7 to the right side. So in order to keep it balanced, You have to do the same thing on both sides. Does everyone agree with me so far? This is going to happen in every single problem that we look at. If you do it on the left, you do it on the right. If you do it on the right, you do it on the left. And left and right refer to where the equal sign is. So we're going to make it very obvious where our equal sign is for our problems today. Questions so far?
No.
All right, a couple more things to write down and then we'll look at some examples. So here are the steps we're going to follow today. First, write the equation. If it's already written for you, great. If it is not written for you, you have to write it. This also includes the line. You're going to see me draw a line in every single problem today. That's part of step 1. So write the equation, draw the line. You can add that on there if you want. Step 2 is to isolate the x term using inverse operation. So you figure out where your variable is, and then you work on getting it by itself using inverse operations. And then number 3 is you simplify both sides of the equations. You know that you are done when you have x equals some number, or p equals some number, or some number equals w. That's when you know that you're done. So we're going to follow these 3 steps. Now, there's sort of like a 4th step that I'm going to make you guys think about on the ones we do together. The 4th step that I like to think about is to check your work. So we're going to just pause a minute after every question and think, hey, does that make sense? Hey, would that work? Actually, if x was 7, would that make sense? So we're going to do that step as well. So the first step is to copy down the problem. So copy down the problem. I told you when we did that step, I also want you to draw a line down from the equal sign. That's going to help us keep the sides of the problem straight. I drew mine a little too long. I'll draw it just like right there is fine. These are only 1 step, so we only need enough room for 1 step. Now, our next step is to isolate x. What is bothering x right now? X wants to be alone, and it's not. What is bothering the x? The 13, the plus 13. How do you undo adding 13? So I need to subtract 13 on the left. If you subtract 13 on the left, what do you need to do on the right? So on the other side of that line I just drew, I'm going to subtract 13. Now, what is 13 minus 13? That's 0, right? 0 when you're adding and subtracting just goes away. You don't have to write plus or minus 0. So on the left side, what do I have?
27.
I have x on the left side. I believe you're thinking of the right side. On the right side, I have 27 minus 13, which is 14. Now, x is isolated. Both sides are simplified. What I like to do is imagine that I take the 14, I pick it up, I throw it in for the x. If I had 14 plus 13, is that going to give me 27? Yeah. And see, I didn't write it out. I didn't take a whole bunch of time to do it. I just plugged it back in and thought, does that make sense? And you don't even need to write it. It's something you can do in your head. But I know, I'm 100% confident that this answer works. What are your questions? So copy this down in your notes. As you are copying it, draw that line. It's called the line of equality. That's where your equal sign goes. So I'm going to draw it Remember, we only need really room for one step. By the end of this week, we'll need room for 2 steps, so it'll be a little longer. The next step is to isolate the variable. So what is bothering the x at the moment? Minus 6. What's the way to undo minus 6? So I need to add 6 to the left. If I add 6 to the left, what do I do to the right? Add 6. Good. I always draw a line down here too, just to sort of like separate the work from the answer. If you don't want to draw any of these lines, you don't have to. It's just kind of how I do it. What is a minus 6 plus 6? That's 0. Once you get to 0 and you're adding and subtracting, you don't need to write it. All you need to write is the x part. So we have x equals, what's 14 plus 6? 20. Very good. Again, we're going to pick up the 20. We're going to put it in for x. Just in our head. This is something I'm just doing in my head. If I put the 20 here, boom. What's 20 minus 6? It sure better be 14 or I need to start over. Okay? It is 14, so I know I'm good. So always just it takes like less than 10 seconds. Just pause and check your work. It'll help you a whole lot as you go through these. Questions? All right, here's number 3. Go ahead and write it down. Oh, the answer line's already there for you. You don't really need that line. You can write it if you want. That's from an old PowerPoint I was doing. I apologize. All right, so I'm going to draw my line of equality. And then think to yourself, what is bothering the variable? So what is the variable in this one? K. What is bothering K? And what's the 3 doing? So what's bothering the K is plus 3. How do you get rid of a plus 3? You minus 3. If I minus 3 on the left, I have to minus... Wait, that's the right. If I minus 3 on the right, I have to minus 3 on the left. 3 minus 3 is 0, so the only thing you have left on the right side is a K. That's going to equal... What is negative 17 minus 3? Negative 20. Very good. Now, some teachers require you to flip-flop it when the variable's in the back and write it as K equals negative 20. As long as you have the negative 20 part, I don't really care how you write it. What are your questions on this one? Easy? Okay, good. All right, here's the next one. Very similar setup. We have the variable on the right side. So again, as you're writing it, just draw that line. That's going to help us separate the left from the right. What is bothering B? Minus 3. How do you undo minus 3? If I add 3 on the right, what am I doing on the left? Plus 3. You have to do the same thing if you want to keep it balanced. Now, the minus 3 plus 3, those equal 0. So you can just cross them out. On the right side, you still have a B. You still have your equal sign where your line was. See, it should all line up, the equal sign and the line. And then we just had to figure out what negative 7 plus 3 is. Negative 4, very good. Now, if you want to rewrite it with the B in the front, that's your business. I'm just going to leave it like this. Why make extra work? What are your questions? All right, here's number 5. It's getting a little bit trickier. So write your problem, draw your line. I don't know why I keep making those lines like crazy big. Getting carried away, I guess. Now, this one's kind of tricky, so take a minute. Think it through. Decide what you want to do. And remember, the whole point is to get this guy equal to 0. That will help you if you remember that. We want to undo this totally. The way you undo it is you get it to equal 0. What would you have to do to get plus negative 9 to equal 0? Plus a regular 9, right? That's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it involves this sign. How do we usually undo adding? Subtracting. So you could also think of this as being minus negative 9. Well, what's a minus negative? A plus. So again, you can either think about it, well, what do I need to do to get negative 9 to equal 0? You need to add 9. The other way to think about it is, okay, I'm adding a negative 9, so I need to subtract a negative 9. Well, subtracting negative 9 is the same thing as addition. So either way you think about it, just make sure you find a way that makes sense in your head. Does everyone understand why we're adding the 9? It's a tricky one. Okay, those are going to equal 0, so we don't need them anymore. I have x. I drop my equal sign straight down. And I have 20 plus 9, which is 29. Very good. This was a tricky one. What are your questions? All right. Again, as you're writing this, put your line of equality straight down from the equal sign. So, boom. Whatever you do on one side of that line, you have to do the same thing on the other. Anyone know what we need to do here? Yeah, you need to do the opposite of subtracting 23, which is adding 23. Those will go away, right? But if you add 23 on the left, you got to add 23 on the right. Okay, on the right side we have the x. I still have my equal sign. What is 5 plus 23? 28. So 28 equals x. If you want to rewrite it, that is fine as well. Questions? Let's wrap this up so you can do your homework. What does it mean to isolate a variable? Isolate means what? Get it by itself. Very good. How do I undo adding? How do you undo subtracting? All right, good. I'm going to give you guys your homework. We are, just so you know, spending the next 4 days learning all about equations. We will get up to 2-step equations by the end of this week. We're reviewing on Friday, which means that at the beginning of next week, you should expect a quiz.